Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started and we'll let people filter in. Welcome everyone. My name is Karen and I'm part of the Chiricahua Regional Council communications team, and I'll be moderating this event. And we are here to celebrate the 30th anniversary of CRC's work in protecting habitats in the Chiricahua, Peloncillo, Dragoons, and surrounding areas. And you're seeing a slideshow right now of some of the work that CRC has done over the last 30 years. If you are on our website or on Facebook or Instagram following us, you've been seeing a series of posts on 30 years worth of great work. So we look forward to continuing to share this over the upcoming months. Just some housekeeping details. We're using Zoom in a webinar format. So participants' cameras are off. You don't need to worry about your cameras or your microphones. Chat is enabled and Q&A is also enabled. So if you have any questions, we're interested in hearing your thoughts and your priorities of where CRC focuses its time moving forward. So please interact and use the chat and ask questions, and we'll have some more time for that at the end as well. We will be posting a recording of this when the session is over, and we are also live streaming this on Facebook. So if people are watching on Facebook as opposed to Zoom, you can post questions or comments there as well, and someone will transfer them over to us here on Zoom. So just as a quick introduction, the work of CRC began in the 1990s when our region of the Chiricahuas particularly was under a major threat of gold mining. And an ad hoc group, which was called the Portal Mining Action Coalition, successfully opposed that and did just a huge amount of work and eventually got a bill signed by US President Bill Clinton. And you'll see a picture of that just now come up, of that bill that was signed that protected Cave Creek Canyon from this sort of development. And Noel Snyder and others were instrumental in that work. And that work became and laid the groundwork for what eventually became CRC 30 years ago. And CRC has worked on many different issues since that time. And we'll touch on some of those today and really focus on what work CRC is doing now and where we're going in the future as well. So I want to start by introducing our panel. We have Wynne Brown, who is the president of CRC, and then we have two board members, Dirk Sigler, who heads up the stewardship group, and Michele Lanan. And I'm not sure, we may have a couple other board members who are attending in the background as well. I do want to mention that CRC is heavily fueled by volunteer and has no paid staff, and everybody who works from the board as well as our advisory panel and our communications team, we're all engaged in this work because we really love it. And I think what that means to members and other supporters of CRC is that all the dollars you donate go directly to projects and services, which is nice. So to start out with, I want to have Wynne just introduce herself and talk some about what the major initiatives that CRC that is working on right now.
Okay, and is the audio working? Can you hear me, Karen? Perfectly, great. Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Wynne Brown. I'm president of Chiricahua Regional Council, which I'm very proud of. And it's incredibly exciting to me that we have been around for 30 years. You can read a lot about some of our other work that we've been doing over the past 30 years. A lot of it's on our website. Most recently, some of you remember the Marijuana Grow Project. And right now we are in strong opposition to the Air Force proposed expansion of the Tombstone Military Operations Area, the Tombstone MOA. And, you know, CRC is really in it for the long haul. I think our track record shows that. But we're partnering with other regional and national groups who are opposing this proposal, including Peaceful Chiricahua Skies. A lot of you have contacted us and saying that you would like to donate to this effort. To do that, you can donate to CRC's general fund with a note that that's where you want the donation to go. And we use those funds as needed for that purpose. And if they're not needed, then we'll use them to otherwise protect the habitats in the Chiricahua, Peloncillo, and Dragoon Mountains. We're also fiercely opposed to the environmental damage that's happened because of the border wall. So one of the things we've been doing is watching and commenting on CBP's border remediation plan. And we haven't just done that. Quite a few of us have actually gone down and worked in the shadow of the actual border wall to help remove invasive species, including Lehman's lovegrass. But, I think it's really important to know that CRC is not just against things. We aren't just an oppositional group. We're also very happy to work collaboratively and collegially with other groups. And in fact, 2 days ago, we just met, several of our board members and I met with the U.S. Forest Service about some tree cutting that was happening in the Paradise area. And the Forest Service was very grateful to us for being eyes on the ground, just as part of the community. They've also been very happy to have our community expertise when it comes to thinning and keeping our area safe from fire, we all hope. We've had community members and CRC board members that have been very valuable to the Forest Service about the thinning in South Fork and in Cave Creek Canyon. But speaking of constructive and collaborative projects, many of you are familiar with the miles of really hard work that have gone into trail work. And I am so not the expert on that, but Dirk is.
So let's talk about CRC's stewardship program. Dirk has started that and leads it, and is going to tell us more about that.
Except that he's muted at the moment.
All right, let's start over. I'm unmuted. I'm live. I'm sheltering in my car because it's blowing a gale outside here. Happy Earth Day. Last year at this time, we were meeting to talk about trail priorities at the Visitors Information Center at Cave Creek Ranger Station. And since then, we've really ramped up our level of participation on rehabbing a number of the trails in the Chiricahuas. So if we go back a little bit, I don't want to go back too far, but if we go back to the 1994 rattlesnake fire, that had a huge impact on our trail system. We started off with about 225 miles of trails, and I would say 2/3 of those trails were rather heavily impacted by that fire and then subsequent fires. The Horseshoe 2, which I'm sure a lot of us have lived through in 2011, was another impactful fire, and it was 10 times the size of the rattlesnake fire. And then Hurricane Odile, which came 3 years later in 2014, had post-fire impacts, debris flows, and heavy, heavy erosion. So we've really taken a hit in the trail system. The Forest Service has not been able to keep up with it. Much of their budget, if you ever look at a graph for where the Forest Service money goes, it's going into fighting fires and not necessarily into recreation. So we're working now with a new model, and that's a partnering model. And the Forest Service has been very supportive to accept multiple partners in this case, where we're all working and trying to pull toward the same goal. This all began about 2 years ago, and we were able to set up priorities where we were trying to reconstruct the framework for the trail system, which would be a north-south and east-west axis. And ever since then, that's more or less what we've been directed toward. We're also trying to raise funding so that we can leverage that money and get foundation grants. So last fall, we started the South Fork Trail rehabilitation, and that was a $46,000 project, of which $10,000 came from CRC, and the rest was essentially leveraged money. So we've been quite efficient at being able to do that. This fall, we'll probably resume finishing off South Fork project and then working across the Southern Crest. And that's going to be an even larger project. So the other part of this, the other aspect here is that we've embraced this hybrid approach where we go in as volunteers first, and that can be the local community, or it can be represented by the Chiricahua Wilderness Trail Crew, which is actually going to start coming into Portal early this coming week to work out of Pinery Canyon over in the old Methodist camp area, Rock Creek Trail, Rattlesnake Trail, Bootlegger, etc. And if we get the volunteers to come in first, we can do the heavy cutting and brushing. And then as you see from the pictures, we get an awful lot of young people involved through Wild Arizona who will come in as a paid crew and do the heavy work. And that's been working really quite well. So that's what I've got for you. Back to you, Karen.
Excellent. So Dirk, tell us how people can get involved in this if they're interested in volunteering, and also what does that look like? What do they need equipment? What kind of skills do they need?
Well, we'll do the training and provide equipment. And generally, if one avenue is to get involved with the Portal Rodeo hiking group, because they do trail work events, and they'll be going up there, I think on Cinco de Mayo, to join forces with the Wilderness Trail Crew. So that's coming right up. That's one way to get involved. We schedule events probably a couple of times a year. Wild Arizona also schedules events, and some of those can be used for in-kind match again when we go to secure funding for larger projects. So that's pretty much it.
And any thoughts about like what kind of physical condition do people need to be in, or what skills, or just any volunteers helpful?
Well, most of us are in our 70s now and still going at it. There's a level, excuse me, there's a level that everybody can participate. Losing my voice.
It is windy there. His voice blew away.
My voice blew away, yeah. It may take me a minute to regroup here, but there's a level for everybody to participate. You don't have to be particularly strong. You can have a pair of loppers in your hand, and as long as you can walk effectively, you can go up the trail and contribute in some way.
Awesome. So I'm going to share in chat and on screen an email if people are interested in volunteering for trail work or possible other involvement with CRC. We are definitely looking for more involvement. Wynne, do you want to talk about what other opportunities there are for people to get involved with CRC's work?
Yeah, sure. Of course, we are always very happy when you want to join CRC, when you want to renew your membership, but we're not just after your dollars. We are really after your ideas. So sending us an email about what you think the priorities are that we should be following what ideas you have, what things you've noticed that maybe need to be done or that we need to be paying attention to. And we also do have some vacancies on the board. So, come to our meetings. They're always the third Friday. At the moment, they're still on Zoom. Eventually, maybe we'll get back to in-person meetings, which would be great. We've also started something recently, which is an advisory council. And the good news about the advisory council for us is that we get to have access to people's perspective, their knowledge, their wisdom. The good news for the advisory council is they don't have to come to meetings. We're very welcome to have you come to the board meetings, but that's not a requirement. And that's a great way to contact us and find out if there's something that you want to contribute. And there's always things that helping organize things, helping send out, helping Karen send things out for notifications. So there's lots of opportunities. See, I think Karen is muted.
Sorry about that. Yes. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about the membership structure too. I know some of the people who are on this are already members of CRC, but just briefly, it is an annual membership. It's $25 for individuals or $35 for a household. We do also have a business membership, and just a quick shout out to our business members: Quailway Cottage, the Migration Taco, and Naturalist Journeys is our most recent business members, and we appreciate their support and thank them for that. We do a membership update periodically. And like Wynne said, we're always eager to hear from members about what's important. So this is another good opportunity. Those of you, whether you're members or not, if you want to put in the chat things that are important to you in terms of our existing habitats and protecting this area, we're always anxious to hear about that. One of the things that is on a lot of people's minds right now is fires. We are entering fire season. We already have at least a large fire in the state and a couple smaller fires in the county, and they're starting to get the fire alerts. And many of us have lived through some pretty awful fires here. So we're going to take a little bit of time just to talk about that. And I'm going to turn it over to Michele to talk about how we can support restoration of the Chiricahua ecosystems to a more natural and safer fire regime.
Great, thanks. You can hear me. I think that most people in Portal now are aware that the Forest Service, in a pretty big change from how they've reacted to fire in the past, has put together the Chiricahua Firescape Plan, and they're now at the stage of actually implementing some of the treatments that were in there. So that's a finalized plan. It's already been through the comment periods and so forth. But it represents a major shift from sort of reactively just putting out fires to trying to acknowledge that fire is a part of this habitat and how to live with it more safely. So in thinking about fire, I thought it would actually be most helpful to just give a quick overview of what is actually known about wildfire in this particular mountain range, because it's actually helpful in thinking about what a firescape might look like in the future. And I think some of this is stuff that isn't really widely known. So that being said, I'm not a fire ecologist. I just like to read about these things. So let me share my screen. There we go. Share. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you a diagram from a paper by Thomas Swetnam, who's with the University of Arizona Tree Ring Laboratory, which is the sort of lead tree ring and paleoclimate reconstruction lab in the world. And this paper reconstructed the frequency of fire in a number of different forests on various sky islands, both in Arizona and a couple of sites in Mexico. And the date on this paper was 2005, you'll notice. So this data set is very revealing, but it excludes Horseshoe 2 and afterwards. So you'll have to imagine that data point. But the way that you get fire frequency from tree rings is similar to the way you can reconstruct paleoclimate from tree rings. If you find older trees that are perhaps dead or incorporated in an archaeological site, you can match up the size of their rings with newer trees until you get a sequence going back into the past. So this picture at the bottom from the tree ring lab that I've put shows the dates of various fire scars, and this one is dated all the way back into the 1600s. And if you look at this tree slice I've put on the side here, these dark lines that I've put red arrows pointing at, those are fire scars. And so this tree survived 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 9 fires, and it kept growing each time until it was finally cut. So you can see and count back to when a fire occurred. So here's what the data looks like. And this is for the Chiricahuas. This is all Chiricahua data. The horizontal lines are individual tree samples, and the black bars are fire scars on each tree. And they're organized by elevation. And then the scale at the bottom are years. So you can see it goes back to almost 1600. So what is this showing? I'm going to sort of slap some history on top of this graph now. All right. So up until right before 1900, this area was occupied by the Chiricahua band of Apaches. And the land wasn't really used other than for subsistence living. There wasn't a lot of settlement. There wasn't a lot of wood cutting. And there were a lot of naturally occurring or potentially set fires. So the native people would set fires occasionally, ground fires to flush out game. But it wasn't uncommon to have fires. If you look here at all these vertical stripes, you know, every 5 years or so, right? Fire, 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 fire. So historically, as far back as Swetnam was able to reconstruct, fire was a pretty constant part of the habitat here in the Chiricahuas, from the lowest elevations you looked at all the way up to the top of the mountain. And probably a lot of it was lightning strike fire. So these forests would have been cleared out every few years by periodic fires. So there wouldn't have been a lot of standing fuel. Then things changed drastically, and this is where we really got into trouble. So once the Apaches lost the use of this area and were driven out, this area, like much of the West, was opened up for exploitation. And the first few things that happened were people moved in massive, massive numbers of grazing animals. At lower elevations, this was cattle, and at higher elevations, it was sheep. So there were actually hundreds of thousands of sheep on the mountain eating everything. And this had the effect of severely damaging the soil. So the soil, a lot of it blew away or washed away because you lost things holding it in. And at the same time, here in the Chiricahuas, the mines in Bisbee needed timbers to shore up all their tunnels. And so they actually came onto the Chiricahuas and clear cut almost the entire mountain range. around the 1920s. So every tree mown down. So you've got animals eating all the vegetation and then cutting all the vegetation. And so you get this gap, you get one more pretty big fire. And if you've ever walked around our forests in a lot of places, say like near North Fork or along Turkey Creek, you'll come across gigantic tree stumps. And there are no trees that size there now. And those were all cut at that time. So we're starting from zero here. We've basically removed the forests and soil, and now a whole lot of baby trees are all going to start growing at the same time. So it's going to be really dense compared to the way it was. And then we enter the era of Smokey the Bear. It says, put out every single fire, right? Fire was really viewed as a senseless waste. And so for a period of almost 100 years, after a short period in which a lot of the older growth trees were lost and many baby trees came in, every fire was suppressed where people could get to them. And the net effect of this, of course, is to have very dense forests that have a much higher fuel load than normal and a demographic skew towards trees that are all the same age or are all very young. And that went on only so long until, you know, eventually you get these catastrophic mega fires. And unlike the tree rings in the past, look how many fire scars were reconstructed from one tree. After Horseshoe 2, there were no more trees that survived in a lot of places to have fire scars to count, right? Because the crown fires killed them. That's it for those trees. So you have to start from zero again. And that's basically why we're seeing more and more of these enormous explosive firestorms in the West. Pair that with warming and dry climate. Right, they're not patchy and they're not ground fires anymore because there's not this mosaic of post-fire habitats. So what is the Forest Service doing and how could we possibly help? It's hard to think about this because we're so used to seeing our forests the way they are and we're attached to them because they're beautiful and wonderful that we don't realize how unusually dense they are in places. So we have a lot of what are called ladder fuels, which are the fuels that allow fires to get up into the crown. And crown fires are the kinds of fires that kill forests, kill trees, and kill firefighters. So those are the fires we really don't want. We want small ground fires. So there's kind of two ways to prevent crown fires, and one is to thin out the ladder fuels, and the other is to reintroduce small ground fires such as controlled burns. Unfortunately, where we are, controlled burns are not really possible in most places in the canyons because the canyons are so steep. So as you gain slope on topography, fires become much faster and much harder to control. And so it would be too dangerous to try and keep a ground fire under control, even in the winter time here. So there's a lot of extreme hazards associated with slope, and a lot of the big deadly firestorm events have been in canyons just like ours. So that is why the Forest Service is coming in and doing the thinning that they are doing. So I'll stop sharing. That's the history. And so the question going forward is, I mean, no one likes to see things being cut, but we can support that work and support the Forest Service for finally taking initiative to start regarding fire as part of the natural environment. And we can provide constructive or helpful feedback And there might be opportunities in the future to even volunteer and help with some of these efforts. And then absolutely, positively do similar types of work on your own property. If you're contiguous or you have a lot of fuel load built up, if firefighters have to come and protect your building during a mega fire, that's going to take resources away from controlling the burn and keeping it from other houses. And support portal rescue, because they're frequently the first people to arrive at a fire, and their initial on the ground work before anyone else shows up can make the difference between either having that fire get out of control or having it controlled that night. So, and there have been some just in the last couple of years. So I guess that's my summary of our fire situation.
That was great.
Don't-
Thank you, Michele.
Don't set anything on fire, please, especially when it's windy like this. That's the other advice.
That was very useful. I'm going to see if anybody has questions about that. That was some good new information to me. I wonder what, if you do have questions, just pop them into the chat. I wonder what you or Wynne or Dirk can tell us about what the Forest Service has been doing in terms of thinning, and what, what's good thinning and what are things that are concerns to us or should be concerns to us.
Well, I can tell you what my thoughts are there, and then maybe Dirk, you could share. So where the Forest Service is currently at, they began the thinning work up at South Fork this year. I think everyone's seen that. They said that they have basically completed the South Fork part of the project now. Obviously, they didn't work up the sides of the slope very far. It's too difficult for their crews, but just having less fuel around the road will make it much easier for them to work in there if fire does happen, and evacuation also. They were hoping to get all the way down to Portal done along the road. And obviously that hasn't happened yet. And that is because of availability of crews. Because as you know, we're starting to have more and more fires in the off season. So they haven't had the manpower to finish that yet. And they're actually probably going to change gears and get a little more work done this year, but over in East Turkey Creek. So there was a post and pole cutting permit issued in East Turkey that went a little bit astray, and it left a variety of sort of downed fuels strewn about. And our district ranger, Doug Ruppel, looked at that and said, first of all, maybe no more post and pole permits in here, but also we need to deal with this ASAP. So they are going to possibly leave the rest of the work in Cave Creek for now and try to get Turkey Creek done quickly, and especially get that already cut material taken care of. So that's what I know. I know that they really do seem to care very much about preserving wildlife habitat, special trees, resources, things like cherry trees and madrones, and owl nesting trees and so forth. I've given them data from some of our researchers, and we have an owl researcher who's going to provide data sets for Turkey Creek. That being said, you know, they got a few cherry trees, although not as many as I feared in South Fork. And that comes down to, you know, they have different crews who all are trying to learn, but, you know, so that's what I know.
That's great. And I know CRC, that's one of the roles of CRC, is to really provide the background of what should be of a concern, and make sure that the Forest Service is adhering to that. Because I know, you know, I think everybody has good intents, but sometimes things go astray. So that is something that CRC often advises on. Dirk or Wynne, anything to add about thinning concerns or what's been happening? Or
Yeah, I was impressed working and meeting with the Forest Service on Wednesday. We had alerted them to the fact that a community member had talked to us and was worried about the amount of cutting that had been done. And I was very pleased that Doug got back to me right away and said that they were going to go out and take a look at it, both with his fire management officer and the silviculturist, and set up a meeting so that we could actually meet with them. So I was really very impressed with their willingness to be open with what they were doing and to inform both us and the community through us. One of the things that I found really interesting, and Michele, you might want to give a little bit more detail about this, was a side of the Forest Service that I didn't really know about, which was their interest in getting cones in order to get seeds. Do you, am I blindsiding you by asking you to comment on that? I thought it was just a really cool thing that they were doing, that it was great to know about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I know too much more than you. I had been aware that they have programs like that for most forests, but I didn't realize how specific it is. So what it is, they have been collecting pine cones, mostly from the Doug firs, but I think seeds from other trees as well, and separating them specifically, not just by location, like mountain range, but by elevation zone, in order to keep the same genetic stock in the right place. And then they're banking these seeds in large numbers at some kind of somewhat fancy seed bank facilities, so that when they need to replant trees in the future, they can actually basically just order 10,000 baby trees that are specifically the right genetic stock for a particular location to replant. So I thought that was really neat. And the number one thing they said that we as a community could do to really help that effort is to let them know when we see on the ground that there is a seed making event or a fruiting event, because the pines don't make a lot of cones every year. They're kind of like the oaks in that they have mast years. So if you see a whole lot of Doug fir pine cones, you can let them know.
And the amazing thing is that all these seeds go to Boise, Idaho, where they're stored and where they're started. And then if, say, the silviculturist in Coronado needs 1,000 year-old Doug firs, they're brought down in a refrigerated truck, and somebody from Coronado goes to Tucson and also rents a refrigerated truck, loads up these thousands of tree starts, and then brings them to Rustler Park or wherever it is. And these seedlings stay in the refrigerated truck until the staff actually gets them into the ground. And to me, you know, that's the kind of project that CRC can just enthusiastically support. And because really, as I said before, we're not just against things. We're really also in favor of building and moving things forward, and anything we can do to help keep the forest safe and to help reforestation efforts, we're all in favor of. And that's a possibility for volunteers.
That's great. I love the being the sort of eyes on the ground. And I know that CRC has really worked to have a very constructive relationship with Forest Service. So for people who are watching this, if you have things that you see that are concerned, certainly feel free to bring them to CRC's attention. Dirk, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, after the 2011 fire, that there was an effort to collect cones, and with the intention to reforest Rustler Park area in particular. It burned so hot there, but it failed. And it failed because the cones that they collected were not viable. And I guess my question to the Forest Service would be, you know, where are we with that now? And is there an effort currently underway where we can do a reforestation project, which what we've been saying is, we would certainly be a part of that. I think we could get school groups involved in that as well. There's a lot of really interesting approaches we could take to it, but it starts with the trees. And I'm not convinced that they have them, but maybe there are some successful seedlings now.
My understanding was that they had a few, but that they would really like to know if we see another massed event so that they can get a lot more from here. So look for pine cones.
Well,
One of the things that we did talk about on Wednesday was whether or not they would be willing to maybe work with us on doing a presentation in the portal community, similar to a So What evening that would be sponsored by CRC. So stay tuned. We're working on that as a possibility. This is just, we didn't even know anything about this until about 48 hours ago.
Great. Lots of good information. We have a couple questions about a couple other proposals that CRC has been involved in that people are looking for updates. So one is to get an update on what's happened with the South Fork Day Use Project. I don't know, Wynne, if you want to address what we know about that.
Yeah, there's at the moment nothing is happening at all on it, but they are reanalyzing the project, I think, in face of the really vast number of comments, reaction that they have. And so there won't be anything else to comment on until I think it was early in the fiscal year of 2023. But that's something that we do watch. And if you keep watching our current on the website and the Facebook and Twitter feeds that Karen sends out, we will keep you informed to know whatever we know as soon as we know it. But for the moment, there's nothing happening with it that we have access to anyway.
And I will say the other question is about the Air Force proposal for flyers. And I'll say on both of those issues, the amount of community input and passion for those issues has really made a big difference. And I think CRC plays a real role in sort of coordinating and formalizing that, but it's the community stepping up. And just from all the way back 30 years ago, we have an amazing community. And I think sometimes it's easy to feel like, does it matter? But it does matter. We see the results of it. So the other question is about the status of the Air Force proposal for the flyovers. And Wynne, either you can take that or I can fill in. Or
if you wanted to, I think you may know a little bit more about that one more recently than I do.
So scoping comments were submitted a little over a month ago, and now the project is going into sort of a lull. So there were lots of scoping comments submitted. There was an online petition that had over 1,000 individual signatures. There were some very detailed and passionate letters written from the scientific community, people in the area, business leaders. Some of you attended a meeting in Animas, which I think the Air Force put on, and I probably hoped nobody would show up. And despite the fact that it was far away, even outside of the MOA, there was a big turnout and a lot of passion, and the media's picked up on this. So I think, there was a lot, even in the scoping comments, are sort of an early phase. So what's happening now is the Air Force is working on a draft environmental impact statement with input from all the federal agencies, and many of whom have to sign off on this for it to move forward. And we've already sort of heard some concerns for all kinds of reasons, including the fire danger, which Michele spoke about. That draft environmental impact statement will not be coming out until the fall of 2023. So in the meantime, we are we're keeping it at least on people's minds. If people are looking for things that they can do, one thing you can do is write to your elected representatives and or the state and federal agencies who will be weighing in on the draft EIS. And there's more information on how you can do that on CRC's website and also at Peaceful Chiricahua Skies. And again, just Wynne mentioned that CRC is fundraising for this. One of the current uses for funds right now is that Peaceful Chiricahua Skies just sent out about 40 packets to elected people all the way from federal level to county board of supervisors in the cities that would be affected by this, information packets. So those were set out, and we're fundraising for just the hard costs for that, postage and printing. Volunteers we're sending those out. So it's kind of in a quiet period for right now, but we don't want people to forget about it, and we certainly aren't forgetting about it. And we're definitely, from CRC standpoint, in this for the long haul to keep an eye on this. The other thing I'll mention is CRC is really focused on the Tombstone MOA, which is our particular region, but this really affects a lot of other areas in Arizona as well. So that's kind of a quick update on that. Does anybody have any other questions or things that they want to talk about before I just finish with one more question for the panel? Okay, I'm going to just to close. And if you do have other questions, people who are watching, put them in the chat. And we'll also, if you're watching this later on Facebook, just drop questions in the chat and we'll continue to monitor that as well. To close, I just want to throw out to each of the board members that are here a question about what is either your fondest memory of work that CRC has done over the years, or your greatest hope for the future of CRC and really for the future of our intact habitats here. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll just jump in here and say that backpacking into the wilderness areas of the Chiricahua Mountains has been one of the fondest, most incredible experiences I've ever had. You can have complete solitude in our wilderness if you desire it. But that, of course, I don't want to take away from the experiences that you can have in the canyons that are far more popular. Obviously, birding is a big part of what we do here and appreciation of other wildlife. But the place continues to surprise. I mean, the existence of, and I'm not going to be specific, but the existence of spotted cats in our area is an ongoing thing, and it's pretty exciting, and there's always something new to experience. And for the future, my hope and my dream is that we can fully reconstruct the trails of the Chiricahuas system-wide, and that instead of seeing trails disappearing, that we can actually reconstruct them and have them become a destination like they were 50 or 60 years ago. And that includes everybody, all the stakeholders, horsemen, hunters, hikers, backpackers, everybody.
I guess for me, I would say my hope for the future through the work of CRC and just in general would be to foster a greater understanding of the role of people as part of nature and the environment, to kind of break down this this barrier that we put up between ourselves and nature, and realize that we're participants in this ecosystem. Everyone who comes here is a participant, and the way that we choose to interact with the Chiricahuas is what makes that relationship either positive or negative. So I love projects like the trail projects that make people see the benefits and the value not only of nature to themselves, but of themselves as stewards of this place. And I think we can foster a similar relationship with things like the fire work. It's sort of an act of love. We're taking care of this place and we want to restore it to its best form and live with it. And as Wynne said, CRC isn't only about opposing projects, but I think that the projects that we have opposed in the past and are going to continue to oppose are projects that don't recognize the value of that relationship, right? They're exploitative. You want to come in and take something or come in and drop incendiary devices or whatever, but you're not really appreciating the place as a participant. So that's how I feel about it.
And I love both what you both said. I think those are both great. I think my fondest memory, it isn't necessarily directly related to CRC, but my first backpacking trip would have been in 1972. And seeing the sunrise from Anita Park and seeing the irises in Long Park and going out to Centella Point and Monte Vista. And so my fondest hope for CRC is that we can change the hinge point. So we can change from seeing the forest and the area tipping toward destruction. I'd like to see that reversed so that the direction is toward reforestation, toward healing of the forest and the surrounding grasslands. And I think that CRC is really in a very good position now to do that. We were very quiet for a while. And we now have a lot of energy and a lot of momentum. And, to me, a really fond hope would be that more people will join us in what we're doing. We do good stuff and we're fun and the work is fun. So that would be my both my memory and my hope.
Thank you all. Those were lovely. I just want to read, first of all, I want to just shout out to Eskild Peterson is another one of our board members who is online, but not on the panel. And I know Helen and Noel Snyder were hoping to be here, but there's some power things going on in Portal today. So we never know how that all works out. But we have an amazing board. I also want to just read a quick comment from Paul Hurt, who says, thank you everybody on this Zoom, board members and activists, for your decades of love and care for this amazing landscape. Hope the success, and then there's a follow-up comment, hope the success continues. For those who didn't see it, there was an executive order today focused on strengthening our forests. So we'll have to dig in and see what the details of that are, but that was exciting news for Earth Day. So good to get some positives there. And I want to close by thanking not only the board of CRC, but all of our members. As Wynne said, it's been quiet for a lot of years, but in the last year, CRC has really stepped up, and we've doubled our membership this year. So thank you to everybody who's joined, and I invite anyone who's not a member to join us. One of the things I love about CRC's work is that it's broad-based and cuts across the whole spectrum. And I think sometimes conservation work seems to get bogged down in partisan issues, and CRC really has none of that. And we have a very broad coalition of people. And that's, to me as an individual, that's really gratifying, because I think we all have investment in this land and protecting these environments. So thank you everyone who is here today. Happy anniversary, 30 years to CRC, and we hope for 30 plus 30 plus 30 more years to come of good work. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah.